Day and welcome to our session called Developing Self-Awareness, How Knowing Oneself Can Improve Our Mental Health. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Jackie Butt and I am a social worker with NL Health Services Mental Health Program. I'm in the role of Provincial Groups Coordinator. I'm very happy to be bringing this session to you, which is usually offered as part of our Wellness Wednesday series. These sessions are offered live on Wednesday evenings from 6 to 8 Island Time in Newfoundland and Labrador. We also are providing recordings of these sessions so that you can watch it at your own leisure in the comfort of your own home. Perhaps you were unable to attend a live session or may not have even been aware that there was a session offered previously and you're coming across this video in looking for services and supports for yourself. Whatever the case may be, I'm really happy to have you with me, and I hope you're going to find this session helpful and beneficial to you as you look at this topic and how it might help you in your own mental health journey. So today we are going to be covering the topic of self-awareness. I want to take a moment just to welcome you all here and to acknowledge you taking the time for your mental health and seeking out resources to support good mental health. When we do these sessions and recording, obviously there's no confidentiality or any other issues that we need to cover. When we do offer them in a live session, we do provide a safe space for people to come together with other people in the province to cover the topic together. So today we will be covering the topic of self-awareness and looking at how we can improve and increase our own self-awareness. In doing so, we want to be able to look at what first is self-awareness. So to lay some foundation as we look at this topic. So self-awareness is our ability to perceive and understand the things that make us who we are as an individual. It includes things like our personality, our own actions, our values, what's important to us, what we believe in, being able to understand the emotions that we may have, and being able to understand and identify our thoughts. So self-awareness is the ability to know ourselves. So just like we can spend time getting to know other people, friends, coworkers, acquaintances, we also can intentionally create time to know ourselves. It is also important to realize that self-awareness is not something that's ever complete. We don't ever fully know, or we don't finish knowing ourselves, because as we're always experiencing new events and things in our life, we're also always changing. New events and experiences change who we are. They give us new things to reflect on, new things to relate to. So self-awareness can be an ongoing journey, just as, again, if we were to get to know somebody and develop a friendship, we don't finish ever getting to know our friend or our coworker or colleague. We continue to get to know them as we go through life together. So we want to be able to reflect on this journey of self-awareness and how it might fit for ourselves or for you in your own life. What are ways that you can engage in self-discovery? What are ways you can find out these things so that you can better know yourself? So self-awareness overall allows us to see ourselves more clearly. It helps us to understand also how others see us. It helps us to appreciate our connection to others and understand how we fit into the world. So with self-awareness, we can step back and see ourselves with that clarity and awareness and have that ability to understand how we show up and how we intersect with others. Throughout this video, throughout this recording, I'm going to be showing a video, different pieces of the video at different times to demonstrate and kind of expand on some of the points we're making. I will just give you a little heads up that sometimes there's a commercial that we need to kind of just ride out for a second. So I will skip the commercials as quickly as possible just to prepare you for that. So on this next slide, we'll show a beginning piece of a video to help us start to think about how self-aware are you at this point?
Sometime later. So what is self-awareness? Basically, it's getting to know yourself, the real you, not the you everyone expects you to be or that you think you have to be. It's about exploring the why and how behind your thoughts, emotions, and actions. It's the art of being deeply aware of your moods and emotions and understanding the impact of your behavior on both yourself and on others. So let's talk about why self-awareness matters. And well, if you want to grow and be better, then you need to have an honest assessment of who you really are. I mean, it kind of helps if you know who and what you're working with.
Okay, so that's just a little quick introduction to the video. We will, like I said, show some more of this video throughout the session. So just to expand on the importance of self-awareness for our mental health and for many other parts of our life. So people who are self-aware tend to be better communicators. This also for sure can impact our mental health, because when we can't communicate effectively, we can't express our needs and wants to others. Because we can probably be a more capable communicator or more effective in our communication, we then can cultivate stronger relationships. And then we can also have a greater self-esteem. So self-awareness is connected to all of these parts of our life. And when all of these parts of our life can be improved, it also contributes to an overall sense of well-being. So there are some barriers to developing self-awareness that we'd like to highlight and just be able to identify, so we can reflect our own self on what might be some of the things that could be impacting our own self-awareness thus far in our life. So when we go through these, I'd like you to just maybe think about your own experiences. One of the things that we often talk about in these videos and when we do education around mental health topics is just acknowledging that there can be a difference between what we intellectually know versus what we are able to emotionally or experientially experience in our life. So some of the information that we're going to cover around self-awareness might be not new for many people watching the video, but what we do encourage you to do is stop and actually apply it to your own day-to-day experiences so you can have greater insight and maybe then some goals that you can start to work towards to improve your self-awareness. So one of the barriers to self-awareness is external distractions. So we do very much live in a fast-paced world where we're very busy, and we may not prioritize self-awareness or self-reflection in our day-to-day experiences. We might feel like we don't have time to engage in introspective reflections. We have distractions of technology, work, social media, family demands. All different things can be impacting our ability to, create the time necessary to do some of this reflection. Also, at some points in our life, we may be extra busy and have a lot on our plates. We may have young children, for example, or maybe starting out in a new career. We may be going through life changes, and these things can create like more demands in our day-to-day schedule and make it harder for us to stop and reflect and check in with ourselves. So connected to those external distractions, we may feel like we don't have the time to do this reflection. You think about, again, your friendships and how you get to know people in your day-to-day life or create relationships. It's through time together, conversations, doing activities. And so when we are busy in our life, creating those windows of time that we actually just spend time with ourselves without the distractions of TV or social media or technology or busy activities, that can be hard to carve out when we already may feel like we don't have enough time in our days. So being able to prioritize carving out that time is really important, and being able to see the benefit of it. That can also then influence our sense of motivation if we can know that there's an impact, a positive impact, by getting to know ourselves, and we may be more motivated to carve out that time. Another thing that can be a barrier to self-awareness is if a person has experienced trauma or abuse. So when someone has experiences of trauma or abuse, it can actually impact our ability to reflect. It can also significantly change our sense of our identity and our sense of self. So there can be two ways that can happen, is that our actual self identity is changed and impacted by abuse that we may have experienced. And also it can make us uncomfortable to take that time to look at ourselves, because we may be sometimes actually scared of what we might uncover, or we may be connected to the next point, emotional avoidance. We may be scared that if we go into processing or identifying feelings or experiences that we may not be able to cope. So sometimes we try to avoid looking at painful things or reflecting on things because it can sometimes be painful, it can be emotional, and sometimes that can be scary for us. So those things can impact our ability to do the self-reflection, engage in the time needed to get to know ourselves. And the final thing is that we can have rigid patterns of thinking, such as perfectionism, defensiveness, or what we call cognitive biases. So when we have these rigid patterns of thinking, it can impact our ability to identify things around ourselves that we may want to notice or be aware of. So for example, if I have a rigid thought that I'm not good at something, then when I have that thought, I don't even allow myself to see any exceptions or cases where that may not be true. So when we get into these rigid views of ourselves or rigid thought patterns, then we sometimes are not actually seeing the truth of ourselves. One of the things I often find in working with people around their mental health is that these rigid thought patterns are often very self-critical and are more negative than what is actually true in reality. So as we go through some of the information in this session today, you will have opportunities to stop and think about whether this might be something that is happening in your life. So before we move on to the next slide, I would like you just to pause and think about your own experience of having time to think about yourself, reflect on yourself, get to know yourself, and just think if any of these factors may be in play for you, or maybe there's something that's not included here that you might identify as well. And just think about where that might come from, or also maybe think a little bit about how you might want to overcome that. Hopefully by the end of this session, you'll see that it is a valuable thing. If there is, for example, a lot of demands on your time and you think, well, this is not really, a priority. This is not going to be, that impactful. So I don't really want to carve out that time to check in with myself. Maybe by the end of this session, you'll see the value and be able to look at how you can carve out that time. If you've been, trying to avoid feeling your feelings because they're overwhelming or scary, or you're not certain about what's going to happen if you start to notice and pay attention to your feelings, again, maybe by understanding the benefits of it and some of the tools to do some self-reflection, you might find that is more easy to manage. I'll also say on that note too, we do have some other sessions that might be helpful. So you might want to pause this session here and go watch some of our other sessions on coping with intense emotions or understanding emotions, and then come back to this video if you feel like you have a little bit more tools to help you manage emotions as they come up. So when we are looking at self-awareness, might want to think about what does it actually mean. So self-awareness can often be used interchangeably with other words, and sometimes we might not actually be fully clear on what we mean by self-awareness. So when we're looking at self-awareness for this session, we're kind of looking at these 5 different elements, and they all kind of come together like pieces of a puzzle to create like a holistic sense of knowing ourselves. So one is consciousness, and that just means being aware of your own internal experiences, such as your thoughts and your emotions. So in order to be self-aware, we do need to have some ability to check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now? What is going through my mind? How am I interpreting the situation? How am I seeing myself? So this ability to go inward and reflect on what's happening with ourselves. We also need to have self-knowledge, and this is understanding who we are, including our beliefs, our values, and our motivations. So we also do have a session on understanding our values that you can consider watching to take you through that a little bit more. So that's another option. Again, some of our sessions for our Wellness Wednesdays all intersect. So being able to build up extra tools if some of these things are not fully familiar to you yet. So being able to identify your beliefs and values is an important piece of self-awareness. Knowing what you prioritize in your life, knowing what motivates you to move towards things, those are really essential pieces. Another piece of self-awareness is emotional intelligence, and this is the ability to understand and manage our own emotions. So with our emotional intelligence, for example, if someone was to ask you, how do you feel today? If you feel like you struggle with being able to put your experiences into words or label them, then that may be a sign that there's some growth needed in that area. So, for example, if I was to say to you, tell me how you're feeling today, and you said, oh, I feel good. And I'd say, well, tell me like what you mean when you feel good. Like, how are you feeling good? And if you don't know how to describe that, or you have limited vocabulary to put those feeling good into words, that might be an indicator that there's some learning still available to you in that area. Self-acceptance is a fourth area of self-awareness, and this is about how compassionate and kind you can be to yourself, how much you actually like yourself. And this is, again, as I mentioned earlier, an area that many people who struggle with mental health also have struggles, because there can be a lot of judgment, a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of criticism of self happening when we struggle with mental health. So when we have self-awareness, we also can develop hand in hand self-acceptance. And we can see ourselves as no different than other humans, where we have our strengths and our weaknesses. We have areas where we are learning. We have areas where we build mastery over things. And so being able to accept ourselves doesn't mean that we have to be perfect or flawless or never make mistakes, but we can actually accept ourselves and like ourselves even when we do have our mistakes or our vulnerabilities. So having self-awareness also can help us develop self-acceptance, and vice versa. And again, self-reflection is another piece of self-awareness. So being able to think deeply about your feelings and your thoughts and your goals in order to gain even more understanding of where you are and who you are in the world. So it kind of ties back to consciousness, but it also is an overall ability to self-reflect. So now we're going to look at why is self-awareness important for good mental health. And so you can just, again, pause and think about this for your own self. Think about how you may, whether you already feel like you do know yourself, or if what you feel like you know is helpful for your mental health, or if maybe your self-awareness or self-reflection contributes to struggling with your mental health. So we're going to go back to our video here now and just continue on from where we left off. So just give me a moment. If there's a commercial, just skip it, and we'll continue on with a little bit more of the video around that.
So let's talk about why self-awareness matters. And well, if you want to grow and be better, then you need to have an honest assessment of who you really are. I mean, it kind of helps if you know who and what you're working with. It's also about being honest with yourself and reconnecting with those parts of you that perhaps don't get to see the light of day that often. Self-awareness lays the groundwork for emotional intelligence. It's the cornerstone of how we handle stress, relate to others, and make decisions. And it's hugely important for good mental health. By understanding your internal processes, you can manage your emotions more effectively, reduce anxiety, and build and maintain positive relationships. So
that's a little bit of a review of something we covered earlier in the slide, of like the benefits and the impact of having good self-awareness, and to elaborate on that a little bit more. So these are some things that self-awareness helps us to have. It helps us to have a sense of our own personal identity. You can think about in relationships, for example, having a sense of your own identity can really be impactful and important, because if we don't know who we are, then we're more easily influenced by others. We may engage in activities or feel like we don't have opinions or preferences and feel like we're easily swayed by other people. But then what can happen over time is that we feel like we don't have a say, or we feel like we might be taken advantage of, and it can lead to conflict in relationships and even endings of relationships, because we don't have that solid sense of self. It helps us to provide clarity when we're making decisions. So if we know our values, we know what's important to us, we know who we want to be, then as we're going through our day-to-day life and we have to make those decisions that are part of life, then we have some sense of what is the right decision for us. So for example, if we come to a crossroads in career or education, and we're trying to make a decision which way to go, being able to say, who do I feel like I am? What's important to me? What kinds of experiences would I like to have? That can be really helpful. So, for example, if we realize I value stability of having, a certain income, then that might lead us down one path. But if we say, having material possessions and having stability is not really a priority, I'm more value, feeling like I'm contributing to society in some way, then that might lead us down a different path. So when we have that clarity of who we are, it can help us with those decisions. It can also help us, as we've already talked about, to name and understand our emotions better. So when we're looking at mental health, one of the things that is very common is that people struggle with different emotions, whether it's anxiety or anger or depression or overwhelm. The struggles that we identify are often around particular emotions or multiple emotions at one time. And a lot of times people don't understand why they feel the way they do, or they may not understand how they can take care of themselves or cope or react to their emotions. So being able to understand ourselves and say, gosh, why am I feeling angry right now? And being able to identify the reasons or the sources of that anger, and then being able to say, well, what do I want to do about this? How do I want to handle this situation? That can help us be more effective in our day-to-day coping and our day-to-day life. And so that's a huge focus in mental health, is learning how to be effective in managing all this complex feedback that we're getting in from our own internal reality and then from our external environment. When we also have self-awareness, we can notice and acknowledge our strengths as well as our areas of improvement. So we do this in a way that's non-judgmental, and it also incorporates self-compassion and self-care. So if I can identify, for example, that I'm not good at time management, and do that awareness or have that awareness without beating myself up or putting myself down, and just simply state it as a fact that this is an area I'm not so great. How can I learn to get better, or how can I manage that weak area in my life so that it's not negatively impacting and having a ripple effect in all kinds of other areas. When we have self-awareness, it can help us understand why we think and feel the way we do. It also helps us to have the ability to practice more self-compassion. It also is very important in helping us to have a better understanding of how life events have impacted us. So most people in life have challenging and difficult experiences. And again, intellectually, we can say and understand that those experiences impact us. But if we stop and reflect on, what were the impacts, how do I react to triggers like those past events, we may end up in situations where we're reacting or responding and not sure why we're doing it in the way we are. And then also it helps us to know our values, as we've already mentioned, and what's most important to us. So all of these points on this slide are all components or pieces of our mental health. And so having a sense of who we are, what's important to us, how we react, how we feel, it can have a significant ripple effect to many areas of our mental health and our coping. So now we're going to move into how to know ourselves more, and how to know if we're self-aware. So how to know if we're self-aware is different questions that, or just to reflect on. So we can have an ability to step back from our emotions and respond instead of reacting if we are self-aware. So if you think about your own day-to-day life, and just think about, as we go through this list, if these points are your current reality. If they are, then that means you probably have already developed some self-awareness. And if you're saying, no, I'm not really skilled in that area, then it might be an indicator that you can continue to do some work around developing self-awareness. So if you are self-aware, as I said, you have an ability to step back from your emotions and you respond to situations rather than reacting. So when we say reacting, it's kind of without full awareness, without full consideration of the situation. And so when we react rather than respond, what we often find is that we are doing or saying things that we regret later, or we may actually do things that make a situation even worse than it was when we started. So when we have self-awareness, we can remain calm, and again, we can be more effective in responding to situations. If we have self-awareness, we can also step back and consider how we come across to other people. We can ask ourselves, how do we sound? How are our statements coming across? Ironically, when we have self-awareness, we can also notice other people's reactions and responses more clearly. So if I was to say something and I notice like a flinch on your face, to indicate perhaps like you're not liking what I'm saying or you're not understanding what I'm saying, then I can have that come back to say, well, maybe I'm not always clear in how I'm communicating. Maybe I need to get better at my communication skills. Or maybe if I notice that somebody is avoiding me, after a discussion, then I might start to think, well, maybe I said something that was hurtful to that person, so I can step back and reflect on that. So that's part of self-awareness. Also, as I mentioned earlier, self-awareness is not something that we ever complete. We don't ever finish becoming aware of ourselves. So in that way, if we're on an ongoing journey of self-awareness, we don't pretend to know everything and we don't pretend to be an expert in everything. So we're always open to learning more about ourselves, about the world, about situations, about other people, because we know that as we learn, we are also growing as a person. And then finally, if you already do have self-awareness, you're not opposed to or uncomfortable with seeking feedback from others. So we don't get defensive if other people point out something that we could do better, or maybe an area that we are not fully kind of addressing or working on in our life. We also, with self-awareness, maintain a growth mindset. So again, going back to the awareness that it's not something that's ever complete. We're always open to learning and growing and improving. This is something that we talk about in our Wellness Wednesday sessions, as well as our mental health treatment groups, is that healing, recovery, learning, growth, they're all an ongoing journey. And so instead of getting mad at ourselves or punishing ourselves when we realize we don't know something or we want to get better at something, we just kind of identified as, oh, here's a new area where I can improve, or here's an area where I have some more learning to cultivate. So instead of getting, again, critical with ourselves when we notice vulnerabilities or our areas of weaknesses, we just look at them as areas for growth. When we have self-awareness, we are able to stay true to our passions and our priorities and our core values. So we are able to be flexible and we're able to adapt, but we also have a core sense of knowing who we are and are able to then map out our life in a way that fulfills us. So that's really important for mental health, because sometimes, again, if we're more reacting to life and just kind of responding to what happens and not really making a plan, then sometimes we kind of are moving through life and we look back and say, gosh, I'm this age and I haven't done this yet, or I regret that. So when we have a sense of who we are, it's almost like having a map or a compass, and we can keep checking that map or compass to see if we're on track for developing the life and living the life that we want to live. Doesn't mean, again, that new things can't unfold or we can't be open to new things, but we still can have a clear sense of like what's important to us. And finally, another piece of how you can know if you already have self-awareness is if you have awareness of some of your blind spots and where you don't see yourself clearly, or at least being able to be open to learning about blind spots. So just, again, goes back to the point that we don't think we have everything figured out. We're always open to learning. So just approaching it as an ongoing discovery. So in this area, one of the things that we can look at and a tool that we can use to help us develop increased self-awareness is this model called the Johari window. So this is a model that's been around for quite a long time. And it's just a way we can look at how well we know ourselves. So in this picture, the squares are divided up like a window pane, and they're drawn on this image fairly equal, totally equally. The squares are all the same size. In reality, for us, the squares are not usually the same size, and we have some quadrants that are bigger than others. So in the top left quadrant, we have things that we know about ourselves and are known to other people. This is called our open window. And this is things that are very visible to us and to others. So for example, if you're a very extroverted, outgoing person and you're like the life of a party, then that's probably something that everybody knows about you. They say, oh, here she comes, like, you know, we're going to have a good time now because this person loves to tell stories and loves to kind of get everything going. So that would be a really visible thing that might be known to yourself and known to anyone around you. Even probably just people meeting you for the first time, they probably like feel that you're very extroverted and very chatty and open. It also could be the flip side. Maybe you're a more introverted person, and that may be something that, you know, is kind of, you're maybe quieter, or you know, you more reflect or kind of observe things than to kind of jump into the middle of them to be the center of them. So that's an example of something that would be an open window, that things will be known to you and to others. Then we have on the bottom left, we have what we call the hidden window. So these are our more private things, things that are known by us but are not known to other people. So it could be fears that you might have, it could be insecurities, it could be experiences that you've had in life that you've never shared with other people. And so these things that are unknown to others but are carried by you and you have awareness of, those are your hidden aspects. On the top right, we have another quadrant that is called our blind spot, or our blind area. And this is things that other people know about us, but we don't know about ourselves. So maybe I have not developed a lot of self-awareness, and maybe I don't realize that sometimes when I speak to other people, I'm very blunt, and maybe I actually am hurtful to people because I'm just kind of saying things that come into my mind. And maybe I don't really know that I'm coming across as hurtful or blunt. That might be a blind spot for me, but maybe, you know, a lot of people around me would all say that about me. So that could be an example of a blind spot. We all have blind spots of, you know, not fully knowing how we come across to others. So it's not something that, you know, we want to make it into like something that's wrong or a bad thing about us, but we would like to decrease overall for self-awareness the whole right side of this image, where there's things that we don't know about ourselves. So we'll look at in a minute how we can change this so that we can have more self-awareness. But the final quadrant, the final square, is in the bottom right, and it's the unknown. So things that are unknown by you and others. So these are kind of really deep blind spots that, you know, we don't know about, and they're maybe not as visible to other people either. So they may not be like kind of very obvious or kind of affecting our day-to-day life in a way that we can actually pinpoint them or other people can pinpoint them. So as I mentioned, in developing self-awareness, what we're aiming to do is decrease all of the right side of the quadrant. And we also are trying to decrease the hidden part of ourselves too, because when it comes to mental health, sometimes the things that we keep hidden from other people are shame-based, or we feel like there's secrets because we are afraid that we're going to be judged or we're not going to be liked by other people if they knew these things about us. It doesn't mean that we can't have anything private that we just keep to ourselves. But even if we have like our closest circle of people, our safest relationships, if the hidden gets moved into those connections, doesn't mean again that every person that meets you has to know everything about you. That wouldn't be so healthy either. But we do want to limit the amount of hidden pieces because again, they're often cloaked in secrecy and shame, which can be very unhelpful for our mental health. We'll come back to this window in a moment when we look at ways that we can increase our self-awareness. I'm going to look at another piece of this video now. So just bear with me as I get it loaded up here. I have another commercial to skip.
Communicate with her francophone grandparents, so I built up her confidence.
So let's
skip ahead a little bit here.
By understanding your internal processes, you can manage your emotions more effectively, reduce anxiety, and build and maintain positive relationships. So let's talk about how to build your self-awareness. Tip 1, reflect. And that means grabbing pen and paper, finding somewhere quiet where you won't be disturbed, and asking yourself the big questions. Who am I? Who am I not? Who do I want to be? Who don't I want to be? Don't worry if this is hard at first, because it is for most people. If you're not feeling it, come back and try again later. The point of this exercise is to get in touch with your own sense of self. And so you may even find it easier to start with the who am I not question, and then slowly build up towards the bigger questions.
So I'm just going to pause this video for 1 second here to kind of, again, encourage you, as I said at the beginning of the video, if you are watching this video and wanting to improve your self-awareness, the tips that we're going to go through here might be things that you want to practice. So you can actually pause the video and do these things as we're going through, or you can write down these steps and then come back to it once you finish the video. And these are not things that you just can do one time. These are things you can do on an ongoing basis. You could even schedule time periodically through the year or at different milestones in life to come back to these tips and exercises to help you develop self-awareness. So the first one that is identified is to ask these questions of yourself. And often it's beneficial to do it writing as opposed to just thinking about it, because if we just think about things in our head, we often get distracted and sidetracked, and we don't really move forward very significantly. So we tend to go around in circles or not go anywhere at all because we get sidetracked by thinking about what am I going to cook for supper this evening, or, you know, replaying something that happened yesterday. So writing things down helps us to kind of actually stay focused and on track. So this is a first tip for developing self-awareness.
Thinking about who you are helps you to make smarter choices that are more in line with your goals and intentions. Tip 2, emotional labeling. Identifying and naming your emotions is a simple yet powerful tool that helps you to understand and regulate your feelings better. Whenever you experience a strong emotion, pause and put a label on it, whether it's anxiety, joy, or frustration. Throughout the day, check in with yourself and identify how you're feeling and why. That helps you learn to recognize and understand your emotions more. Tip 3, try new experiences. Stepping out of your comfort zone can reveal unknown aspects of your personality. New experiences challenge your preconceived notions and habits, and it can lead to new ways of looking at things. Whether that involves traveling, learning a new skill, taking up a hobby, or just making changes to your routine, new experiences can help you grow and find new opportunities to enjoy yourself. Tip 4, ask for feedback. Sometimes we need an external perspective. Ask close friends or family members about how they perceive you in various situations. This is helpful because others often notice things about us that we miss. Approach this exercise with an open mind and be prepared for constructive insights. Tip 5, journal. Writing about your daily experiences and emotions can be incredibly revealing, because we don't often spend a lot of time thinking about why we do what we do or don't do. Journaling helps you process your thoughts and feelings, uncovering patterns you might not have noticed. Aim to write regularly, even if it's just a few sentences about your day and how you felt. Here's the thing, the more you get to know yourself, the more you can understand what really matters to you. And you can make more informed choices that lead to greater peace of mind and better mental health and well-being. You've got this.
Okay, so those are some really valuable and effective tips to help us to develop a self-awareness. So I'm just going to go through some of these things a little bit more to just slow it down and elaborate. But again, you can come back and watch this video and even skip ahead to the video in the video to kind of review those things if you haven't written them down already. So one of the things that we want to do to increase our self-awareness is just creating space for mindful awareness of our thoughts and our body sensations and our actions and our choices. We can do this through journaling. Sometimes we can just stop through our day and notice things, and perhaps even a combination of those two things would be effective. we're not going to be able to journal like, multiple times or for extended periods through every day, but being able to just pause and ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? What's going through my mind? Am I replaying something traumatic that happened to me 5 years ago? Is that maybe why I'm feeling anxious right now? Am I noticing like, butterflies in my stomach or tension in my shoulders, or am I clenching my jaw? What's happening for me to be having that body reaction right now? And we can even just ask ourselves, what am I doing right now? Am I shutting down? Am I isolating? Am I connecting with others? Am I doing an activity I enjoy? What helped me to do this activity that I enjoy? So just being really curious and reflective over what we're doing, thinking, and feeling. So we can, again, as I said, do that by just pausing through our day and asking ourselves some questions, but it is really good to at least periodically do that through writing, because it does help us to go a little bit more deep and a little bit more focused. So we may uncover insights that we don't just get by stopping and thinking about it. We also, as it said in the video, can ask others about their feedback, but make sure you ask people that you trust and you feel safe with. So don't ask someone who, maybe you feel is more critical or abusive in a way that they can't deliver that information in a healthy, helpful way. And, just maybe also like let people know if you want to put some limits around it, or you only want to get feedback around one thing at a time, because you certainly don't want to open up a conversation and someone feels like, oh, now I'm going to tell you all the beefs I've had with you for the last 20 years. Like that wouldn't be helpful. But you could ask someone, say, like, I'm just wanting to kind of know a bit about my blind spots and maybe some things I might not notice about myself. And maybe you might have a specific question, or you might even want to ask about some of your strengths and some of your qualities, or good qualities, like, what do you like about me, or what do you think I'm good at? So it can be really positive questions you can ask yourself. And the other thing, as it says in the video, is we can try new things. So as we try new things, we can also loop back and ask ourselves all these questions, like, what am I thinking as I'm trying new things? What am I experiencing in my body? And what are the actions and choices that are involved here? Or you can journal after you try something new and just, think about, how did it feel? What did I discover about myself? Did I discover strengths and skills that I may not even know I had? So if we stay in our comfort zone and just do the same things over and over, we often don't see all the qualities or all the aspects that we may hold. So now going back to the Johari window, as we said, what we're trying to increase ultimately is this public or open area. This is the more we have ability to go out into the world, being our authentic self, having confidence in ourselves, knowing our own worth and value, that usually goes hand in hand with good mental health. So if we want to increase the public area and decrease our private area, the things that we only know ourselves, we would do that by self-disclosure. So even things that we might find that we are keeping secret or might feel ashamed about, again, slowly and in safe relationships, we can start to share about that. So for example, if you struggle with anxiety and you try to put up a mask and not let people see the struggle you might have, you might start saying to some close people, like, hey, I'm feeling really anxious right now, or, I've been struggling with some anxiety in, social settings lately, and it's really hard for me to commit to going to this, but I really want to do it. So little bit by little bit, we can start to share things that are more private. So self-disclosure is a piece of increasing the public area and decreasing the things that we only know ourselves. Seeking feedback from others, as we've already said, is a way to reduce our blind spots. And we also can get to know things about ourselves and reduce the unknown area by just overall doing some of this overall reflection and engaging in new activities. So this is really a positive thing to do, and mindfully and intentionally to start to seek out information. So there were some questions posed in the video, the last part of the video that we just showed, but these are just some things that you can think about asking yourself, again, regularly or on a occasional basis. So you can ask yourself, what are my guiding principles or values in life? So what are the things that are most important to me? If I had to have like a rule or a model that I live by, what would that sound like? What makes life meaningful for me? So that can also help us answer the first question, but is also a valuable question in and of its own self. What makes life meaningful for me? What do I stand for, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular? So these questions are all reflecting on our values and who we are. And we can also ask ourselves, how do my actions reflect what I stand for? So the first one is more of an intellectual, kind of cognitive thing, like what do we stand for? But the second one can be another way we can come at it and look at, how do we spend our time? What are our actions? So we spend a lot of time, for example, with family, and cooking for family or helping family, then what does that tell us about what we stand for? Maybe we value contribution, maybe we value kindness, maybe we value helpfulness, maybe we value being loving, supportive. Like all these things could be things that we stand for. And we also can ask ourselves if there's any beliefs that we've outgrown, but we still hold on to out of habit. So maybe we've done some self-reflection and we have realized, like, I don't need to keep, this part of my experience secret anymore because I don't feel shameful about it. But we may notice that, it's kind of our default or our habit to still like kind of hesitate to share things with people. And so we can just continue to overcome that habit because we know we've shifted our beliefs. Some more questions we can ask ourselves is, what went well today? What am I grateful for? So this tells us a bit about ourselves and our strengths and what's important to us again. We can also ask ourselves, were there any challenges that I experienced today and how did I handle them? Being careful again to really look at the facts, because sometimes again we have that default to look at what we did wrong or how we should have done things differently, but we often don't notice the successes or the strengths that we demonstrated. So being able to really like identify the facts. So maybe we had a conflict with somebody in our day, and maybe we wanted to be able to stand up for ourselves and say some more, but maybe we want to be able to acknowledge, but you know what, I didn't yell and I didn't walk away. So maybe that's growth and progress that we want to be able to identify and hold on to. We can also ask ourselves, what emotions did I experience most strongly today, and why did I feel those emotions? What was happening to cause them? Was there something that happened like in my environment that triggered it? Was I thinking about things? Were my thoughts maybe a big factor? Sometimes even we have external triggers, it's more of our thoughts and how we interpret those situations that affect how we feel. So for example, if I was walking down the road with a friend and someone was walking towards us with a big dog, if I have thoughts like, oh my gosh, that's a big dog, I don't like big dogs, that's probably going to attack me, then I'm going to have emotions of fear and anxiety, or maybe even anger at the person for like, walking that dog in an area like that, maybe the path's really narrow and I have to get really close to it. Whereas my friend might see the dog and think, oh my gosh, that's such a nice dog. I love dogs. I wonder, can I pet the dog? So they would have pleasant emotions. So being able to identify your emotions and then identify the things that contributed to them helps you to get to know yourself. And then helps you maybe to also think about what you might like to do to cope differently or respond, but again, without judgment of yourself for your emotions and your coping. We can also ask ourselves, did our actions align with our values and goals today? So when we do go about our day-to-day life, sometimes we don't think about our values or our goals, and we might react and respond in ways that are either neutral, like don't really help us move towards our values, or maybe even be opposite to our values. So for example, if I have social anxiety, but I do value having meaningful connection with others, but I turned down an invitation to go for a coffee with somebody, then I can say, that choice didn't align with my values. I really want to be able to have connection, but my anxiety, overrule that in the moment. And so the next time I'm asked for a coffee, or maybe I want to go to that person, say like, hey, I didn't go yesterday, but I really would like to go with you this week. Like, could we go another day? So it's trying to understand like what happened and where we might be off track, but again, without punishing ourselves or judging ourselves. So that leads to the last question. Is there anything I could do to do differently tomorrow to grow or improve? We also can continue to ask some deep questions. Like these are ones that really get into like kind of more reflection and deeper growth and awareness. So we can ask ourselves if there are any patterns in our life that keep repeating, and if so, what's contributing to them, or what's triggering them. So we all usually, I think pretty much it's safe to say we all have patterns in life that are not always the ones that we are most wanting to have or to hold. So being able to reflect on them again with awareness, it decreases our blind spot. We can also ask ourselves, how do I usually respond to stress and pressure? And what does this reveal about my coping mechanisms? We can ask, what are my core fears and how do they influence my life choices? Who am I when I'm not fulfilling my roles in my family or my work in my community? Because often we identify ourselves by our roles or our titles. But if we were to take away those roles and titles, who are we still? What again is important to us? It's not that we want to stop those roles because they are important, but sometimes we over-identify with the roles and titles and we lose sight of who we are at the core. So asking that question can help us identify that. We can also ask, is there anything I need to forgive, either in myself or others, to release feelings of resentment or guilt or shame? So these questions might get into some deeper emotions and some painful topics. So when you do this reflection and writing, it is okay to give yourself a time frame or use some coping skills if you do start to feel intense emotions. Again, I'll say that there's some videos that can help with some of that if you're wanting to develop some confidence in yourself to handle these things that could come up if you start to think about some of these deeper questions. And then there's also some relationship questions we can ask ourselves. So we can ask ourselves things like, what have I received from others? This helps us to develop develop gratitude. And so being able to identify, it could be even like back in earlier stages of life, who were your teachers, who were your mentors, who were people that helped to shape you, who taught you some of your important values or things that were really important to you in your identity. So just thinking about this, it could be even just on a daily things like, you know, did I receive anything from anybody today? Maybe somebody held the door open for you at the store. And so that was like a little moment of kindness and just presence and seeing you as a person. So that's something we can just acknowledge, like I received that little moment of help from somebody. Or again, it could be a bigger thing, like maybe you think about a teacher you had in elementary school and how they, you know, saw your love of art and really like when you did drawings or did artwork in school, they really like gave you attention for that and really made you feel like you had some special qualities. So it can be any different way that you can think about the relationships and the things you've gotten from other people. On the flip side, you can also think about what you've given to other people, and this helps us to feel self-respect and helps us to see our worth and value. Not to say that we only get our worth and value by what we give or do for others, but it is an important part of relationships and helps us to make sure and reflect on that, you know, in our relationships, do we have a balance of give and take? Are we more on the receiving end from others, or are we more on the giving end to others? And then we might want to think about, do we need to do some work to balance that out? But overall, being able to know that we've positively impacted other people can help us feel confidence and feel self-respect and feel pride in ourselves. And then the third question we can say is, what troubles or difficulties have I caused to others? This helps us to increase our accountability and self-awareness and even having some humility to know that none of us are perfect. And sometimes we do interact with people in a way that may not always be ideal or may not be even intentional to cause any difficulty for others, but just know that that can happen. That's a part of relationships. So if we can reflect on that, then we have more ability to change it and to acknowledge it in relationships. And we can go back and say, hey, you know what? I realized like I had promised you that I was going to help you out with this project. And then I wasn't in the mood and I didn't show up for you. And I just want to acknowledge that that probably wasn't the greatest. That I didn't really follow through on my word for you. And so that can help improve a relationship. but we need to have self-awareness to be able to do that and be able to be okay with acknowledging that we made a mistake. And then another series of questions we can ask ourselves are some growth questions. So this is like about recognizing that journey of life and being able to step back and kind of reflect on our life as a whole. So we can look at and ask, what have been my successes and failures in life, and what have they taught me about myself, about my strengths and my weaknesses? And is there anything I'm avoiding in life, and what might happen if I actually faced it directly? Sometimes the fears that we have really have a huge impact on our quality of life, and the actual facing of them in the end ultimately is easier than the things that we do to avoid them. That again is easier said than done, I know. And again, in our treatment groups, it's a big focus of what we look at is how we can face things and deal with things head on so that we can not be kind of held prisoner or held captive by our fears. So these are some more questions you can think about. So now, so all those questions, again, you can write them down. You could get like just a piece of paper, or you could actually, after this session's over, go out and just buy at the dollar store somewhere easy, a notebook or a little book that you can do some reflections in, and put these questions in there, and maybe, you know, periodically like pick one or two to just write about and just see what you discover about yourself. It's also really helpful. Another way you can do this reflection is when you are struggling with something, if there's something bothering you or you're trying to figure something out, how you feel or how you want to cope, is just to write in those moments as well. And just kind of, we sometimes call it like free flow writing, where you don't really censor what you're writing and you're not worried about punctuation or spelling, or does this sound okay, or does this make sense? You just kind of write a stream of consciousness, write down everything that comes in your mind. And by doing that, sometimes you can have insight into what's happening or how you're feeling or what's being triggered in you. So this whole process of reflective questioning is just like you would ask a friend as you're trying to get to know them. You ask questions to kind of, you know, deepen your understanding of them over time. Now we're going to move into one of the pieces of components of self-awareness that we talked about earlier in the session, which is emotional intelligence. So as we said, it's a component of self-awareness, and it is a reality that many people have difficulty naming and identifying their emotions. But when we're able to increase our ability to name and identify them, it helps us to understand ourselves more fully. And then we also can communicate that to other people, which does impact positively our relationships. So, and it's also been shown that when we can name and identify our emotions, we can respond to them more effectively. So if I don't know, if I just know that I'm feeling bad, as I said earlier in this session, I don't know why I'm feeling bad or how I'm feeling bad or what is actually going on, then we often feel incapable or confused as to how we should respond or cope. Whereas if I can say I'm feeling really angry because I feel like I have someone's let me down, and this is not the first time that they've let me down. Maybe they've, you know, many times through the past have made a promise to me and a commitment to me, and they don't follow through. So now I'm feeling mad. So when I can say all that and identify that to myself, then I can say, well, what do I want to do about that situation so I can respond more effectively? So emotional intelligence helps us to have an ability to name and identify our emotions. So this next slide is an example of emotional wheel that has all kinds of emotional vocabulary on it. So you can take a screenshot of this and have it, for example, on your phone, or you can just Google, you know, a chart of emotions or emotion wheel and get something like this to see. It's actually really helpful to have this available if you feel like you're not very skilled yet at being able to identify your emotions. Having a visual like this can be really helpful. If any of you watching this video are parents, it's also a really good tool to use with children. You could even put something like this on your fridge and help your children and help yourself to increase your own vocabulary. So you might even look at this at the end of the day or periodically for a check-in with yourself and look at the different words that are there and say, what of these things am I feeling right now? What word best describes? So in the inner part of the circle, there's what we call some of our core emotions. And so these are kind of like broader words that we can use when we don't really have the more specific emotional vocabulary. But really, we want to be moving more and more towards the outer circles where we're getting really specific and really nuanced at being able to identify how we're feeling. And then, of course, being able to connect it to, like, you know, maybe what we're thinking about a situation or something that's happening around us. I also really want to acknowledge, in looking at emotions and emotional intelligence, that sometimes we don't realize that we can feel more than one thing at a time. So sometimes we may be dealing with more than one situation, or even if we're dealing with one situation, we can have really complex feelings about it. We can have what might even appear to be opposite feelings at the same time. So we can feel happy and fearful at the same time, or surprised and angry at the same time. So just know that you don't have to only pick one feeling. And in fact, sometimes if you can identify more than one feeling that you're having in a situation, that's also a sign of emotional intelligence. So again, an easy strategy, well, easy to kind of do, but maybe a bit harder to actually like kind of get the answers, but would be to set a little reminder on your phone or associate this with an activity that you do through your day. Like maybe, for example, every time you sit down for a meal, or every time you change between one task and another, or maybe at the end of the day when you're doing your nighttime routine. But just to connect this with something you do through the day, to just pause for a couple of minutes and just say, how am I feeling right now? What emotions am I experiencing in my body? And to kind of elaborate on that, one of the ways we can identify our emotions is to identify what we're feeling in our body. So all of the emotions, back to these core emotions, are all have physical sensations in our body. So our body is hardwired to biologically have sensations to help us notice our emotions. And so if you, you know, start to pay attention to your body, whether there's tightness in your shoulders, or how's your stomach feeling, or what's happening in your head, what's happening in your face and your jaw, any sensations you notice in your body that are not, you know, just because you stubbed your toe, for example, not for that, but you might even have emotions if you stub your toe, though, for that matter. But just kind of noticing, and you start to know, okay, when I have this tightness in my jaw, that might mean that I'm feeling, you know, insecure, or maybe I'm feeling scared. And you start to notice and make those connections in your body. So as an example, when it comes to anxiety, we often will feel these different sensations with this little figure is called alarming adrenaline. So when we are experiencing what we sometimes call the fight, flight, freeze response in our body, all these signals get sent from our brain to our body and back again from our body to our brain. So if we notice that we start to feel dizzy, or our breath starts to change, we start to feel these sensations in our stomach, we notice muscles tightening, we may have to run to the bathroom, we may notice changes in our heart rate, we might notice that we get really sweaty or really cold, we might get trembly. We also might have, you know, changes in like our facial expressions or how we see things. Sometimes we can experience things like tunnel vision. So these are all body sensations that can happen as a result of emotions. And so being able to connect the awareness of what's happening between these two things can help us identify our emotions. So that brings us to the end of our session on self-awareness. So I just want to clue up with a few points and reinforce them, and again, encourage you to think about how you want to incorporate some reflection into your day-to-day life. I just want to emphasize the importance of self-awareness to our overall mental health. As you can see from this video, improving our self-awareness can improve our relationship with other people. It can improve our own coping, can help us decrease some of the struggles that we experience in our mental health. Self-awareness is often associated with, you know, being able to have compassion and care for our own self, seeing ourselves as, you know, with the same forgiveness that we would for other people. We often realize that we don't expect perfection from others, but we do expect sometimes perfection from ourselves, which is not really fair or realistic. We also want to remember that self-awareness is something that we develop over time. So if you take some of the strategies from this video, not just to use them today or tomorrow, but to think about how can you do these things periodically. Sometimes we think about things like New Year's resolutions, for example, something we do like once a year. If you only even do it once a year, stop and kind of check in with yourself. Well, that's better than nothing. But ideally, we can be doing some of this on a daily basis, or even like setting aside some time once a month to just check in and say, how am I doing? How's my life going? How do I feel about things? Is there anything new I've discovered about myself in the past week or the past month? So going back to some of those questions we provided. And so putting this into your daily or your lifestyle is a really helpful thing to think about. So again, as we experience new things, we are also always changing and we're learning more about ourselves. So self-reflection ideally is an ongoing thing. And so just want you to think about from this session, what would that look like for you? What would be things that you can do to incorporate this into your own day-to-day life? So at the end of the session, just want to clue up our Wellness Wednesday session on self-awareness with reminding you that there are many resources available in our mental health program in Newfoundland and Labrador. This is just a sample of some of the things that are available. And so I want to just highlight, if this is, some people might, only need to watch some videos and they get what they need from these sessions to help them have tools and ideas to improve their mental health. Some people might want to access some other options. So some of the things we would identify and a good starting place to get other information on options is Bridge the Gap. Many of the things, or all the things actually, that are outlined on this slide are available on our Bridge the Gap page. So if you just Google Bridge the Gap Newfoundland and Labrador, you'll get linked to that website. And there you'll find these resources such as Mind Well You, which is mindfulness strategy, mindfulness teaching. We also have therapist-assisted online resources, TAO for short. There's 2 different variations. You can do a therapist-assisted TAO, or you can do self-directed TAO. So those are all available, and you can pick different topics that you want to work on. They're very helpful. You can do them at your own pace. Then from TAO, there have been some online short programs created. So it's some of the focused materials from TAO are compiled that you can have a specific topic that you work on. There are Doorways clinics all across the province that you can access. So to have very quick and helpful access to a mental health counselor in your community. So if you Google like your nearest health center and Doorways, you'll find information on your clinic that's near you. You can do in-person sessions, you can do virtual sessions, you can do phone sessions at most places across the province. We also have anxiety programs that you can find on Bridge the Gap, and really want to encourage people and improve the awareness of LifeWise, which is a peer support organization in our province that has really fabulous resources. So they have what's called a warm line that you can call 7 days of the week and talk to a peer supporter. It's a really, really helpful process if people are struggling and just want to talk to somebody who, excuse me, who may understand what you're going through. So that's another really helpful resource to be aware of. And I have mentioned through this session that we also have other services through our provincial groups program. So we do have other recorded videos that you can watch. And we also do have options for treatment groups. So we have groups, for example, around anxiety treatment, depression treatment. We have a holistic mental health skills group and many others. So they're all also listed on Bridge the Gap. So if you're ever interested in doing a bit more of a structured group experience, then those are options that can be really helpful to people. So I just want to thank you again for taking the time to attend the session today. I hope that you've got some takeaways that are valuable to you, and you put them to use and find some success with them. again, as I said at the beginning of the session, hopefully you're walking away with an understanding of how self-awareness is impactful and important for your mental health, and also have some ideas about how you can engage in some tools and strategies to improve your self-awareness. As I bring this session to a close, I just want to invite you to provide some feedback on this session to us. So you can go to this link or you can scan this QR code, and it's a very short survey, just giving us some feedback on your experience of this session. We also invite recommendations or suggestions if you have a topic that's not included that you'd like to see covered. And these sessions, or these evaluations rather, are anonymous, but we do get the feedback in a way that we can get suggestions and know things that you found helpful, or if you do have any suggestions to improve your experience. So thank you again for your time and your attention, and I want you to give yourself, again, if you stuck to this video and finished it, really give yourself a pat on the back for prioritizing your mental health and taking the time to learn things to help you improve your coping. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.